Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This week, we're going to do our summer series deep dive on the dangers of LifeWise Academy. So, we'll be getting into some details regarding some potentially dangerous situations, some situations that have already occurred, and the employees and volunteers that are involved with LifeWise. A couple of different issues that we're going to go over.
So LifeWise likes to say that, these safety concerns that we have aren't really an issue because they assume all liability. This was actually a big issue last year. We started raising questions about it in June because the state law in Ohio and in every other state that has a state law very specifically says that the sponsoring entity must take liability when they're taking these students off campus for RTRI. It says that in every state law that has state law about it, right? It's a very big point. But in June of last year, we started raising questions about it because they were having parents sign a liability waiver that released them from any kind of lawsuit, any kind of wrongdoing. And you had to sign this waiver in order for your child to participate in LifeWise. So, our questions were how can they be assuming liability if they are, waiving it? If they're having parents waive it and releasing themselves of that liability, they're not really assuming it, right? Uh, we raised these questions, and then in August, Westerville is actually raising these questions too, to the point that their attorneys didn't want to make a recommendation about a district policy because it was such a big issue. They actually suspended the program for a minute in August. Um, Days before the next school board meeting in September, LifeWise quietly eliminated this liability waiver in order to be compliant with Ohio law and in hopes of getting the program reinstated there in Westerville. So just some highlights of the waiver. Parents had to agree on not suing LifeWise and acknowledging that any risks or injuries may be a result of or compounded by, quote, actions, omissions, or negligence of LifeWise. I mean, it just completely wiped their hands of any liability, right? It specifically asked parents to make a covenant forever releasing and discharging LifeWise from any claims. It's interesting that they chose to use the word covenant. It's a very coded word, right? This is typically used in the context of making an agreement with God, right? Like, or under God. Like, you can make a covenant with another person, but it's usually involved with this religious, references. So, but they did eliminate this waiver, but they didn't do it until September of last year. So it's just important to know that until September of last year, there was this big question if they were operating outside the bounds of the law, and it really seemed like they were, especially since they bent over and complied immediately as soon as lawyers started asking the questions instead of just us. So we'll talk about some of the qualifications here a little bit because it's another thing LifeWise likes to claim so much is that, their teachers are all certified and qualified. Their certification is simply their own certification. LifeWise's certification is not a teacher certification in any sense of the term. The qualifications that they ask for are so subpar. They ask for a minimum of 2 years experience teaching either in a school or a church setting. This means you could simply be leading a Sunday school class for 2 years, and that's good enough for them. The other qualifications that they ask for are a mature personal Christian faith consistent with LifeWise Academies and active membership in a church that aligns with LifeWise Academy, right? There's literally more points on their resume about their religions and their faith than there is about their actual experience. And again, the certification is really just a couple webinars and some Zoom training.
Yeah, and as you can see here, we've broken it down, and this is just for Ohio, right? So keep that in mind. Most states have roughly the same sort of requirements. Differs very slightly. There's different names for different things, but a lot of them are very similar. For Ohio, we have broken it down. And of course, you're going to need a bachelor's or a master's degree to teach. That's 4 to 6 years. You're going to have to pass all of these assessments, all of these BCI and FBI criminal background checks. And most importantly, they're putting your information into something called a wrap back system. And a rat back system is something that I believe other states use, a lot of states use. If they're not you, if it's not called that, it might be by a different name. But really what it is it's an indication service where all of your teachers' informations or your school employees' informations are put into a collective database. And then if you are, let's say you are a bus driver and you get a DUI, that information will pop up immediately in the ratback system, and the school district that you're employed with will see that. And that goes for teachers as well. Let's say you're a teacher and you're charged with neglect of a child or child abuse or something of that nature. That's going to pop up right away. It's going to let your teacher, or it's going to let your school know. It's going to let the Department of Education know where you're getting your licensing from. And none of this is happening for a LifeWise Academy teacher or volunteer. They're not being put into any system. No one would ever know if they were committing a crime outside of that LifeWise classroom.
Yeah, and we'll get into that a little bit more later here in a couple slides. We'll get into the background check specifically. There is a really good resource in our citations at the end that has every state's requirements for these background checks and these certifications that you need at a state level to be a state teacher. So that's one of the things I've got in the citations at the end if you're interested in your own state. So. And we see this lack of training and this lack of, experience really come out when we, see things like this on the ground. We've got these emails from Defiance here in Ohio. This one specifically is talking about leaving kids on a bus unattended. There were 3 kids on a bus with no adults around, um, fighting, kicking, screaming. Um, this one, they actually got restrained on the bus by one of the teachers. I'm sorry, the next one is about leaving them alone. This is the one where the kid got restrained. So yeah, this one wasn't where they were left alone. This is where the kid was getting restrained by a LifeWise teacher. Um,
I placed his feet on the ground, held my leg over his to keep him from kicking, and reminded him he wasn't allowed to kick the bus. He screamed, crawled under the bus seat. So this person is physically holding a child down. If you have any experience in childcare and child development with children with special needs, you'll know that this is a highly debated and very complex situation that you need lots of training to be able to handle correctly. And this is not what's happening. This person
I
has
mean,
no idea what they're doing.
specific certification to restrain a child in a school. You can't, no teacher can just do that. There is specific training and certification in order to be able to restrain a child in the school. This is why we have school resource officers and
Yeah.
people in these positions to do this type of thing. But it goes on to say that, they just ended up giving him candy to calm him down. Like they have no idea how to deal with this type of behavior, to the point that they're actually asking the school to help with this and what they could do. This is also the one about where the student is talking about self-harm, I believe, right?
I think it is. I think that we do have one. If this isn't it, we do have another one that is of that nature. And I think the important thing to remember here too is not just this one specific situation, right? But that none of these teachers, none of these volunteers have that experience, have that training. They're not required to do so. And I am not an expert. Many of you might be. But one thing I do know is that there is so much value in consistency and with creating a routine and things like that for children who need more structure like this, right? And so when you're putting that child into a situation where they don't have someone who's trained, where they're going outside of what they would normally do, what in an incident situation, or if they're having a meltdown of some sort, you go outside of what is normally happens, and that can regress that child back, right? That can cause all sorts of issues at home and at school where there are people that are trained, because he's having this experience during the day that is so far out of what he is used to or she is used to, if that makes sense. So there's the regression part of it as well.
This is another email from Defiance. This is the one I was referencing earlier about the children actually being left alone on the bus, which led to a student punching another student. And the other thing that it led to was one of the students hopping in the driver's seat of the bus. I mean, what if the keys had been in there? What if they would have put that bus into gear and tried to drive it? And it's not out of the realm of possibility. We're talking about 3rd and 4th graders, right?
No, absolutely not. I mean, my mother is a retired school bus driver, a public school bus driver. And this is exactly why. I mean, this is 101 why you never leave children unattended on a bus ever, no matter what. If there is an emergency of some sort and you have to leave the bus, you are supposed to get another adult to come onto the bus, another authority figure to come onto the bus while you are gone, or vice versa, right? Um, it's like day one thing, right? Because not only could they have started the bus, not only could they have driven off or hurt themselves, damaged property, whatever, but even if they hadn't gotten that driver's seat, there's so many items on a bus that can be dangerous, fire extinguishers, tools that are available to the bus driver. There's just no reason why children should ever be on a transportation vehicle like that without any kind of supervision.
Right. And, this wasn't just I turned my back for a second because, like I said, a student got punched. There was a whole big debate about who was going to be on the bus. And the teacher, the LifeWise teacher, just folded when the kids said, "No, you get off the bus first." You can see that in the email. And the teacher here admits to being intimidated. If you're intimidated by third and fourth graders, you shouldn't be in a position of authority with them. Bottom line. That's insane.
You should not be their caretaker, right? Like that is who they're going to. So if you're intimidated, there's no one there with any kind of responsibility, like Zach was saying. Also, it shows here that it looks like, I guess, the bus driver, it says must have gotten off the bus to use the restroom. What does that mean? My mother, as a public school bus driver, had her breaks and her schedule down to the second of when she was able to go to the restroom and when she wasn't, and when she could do this and when she could do that, because she knew that she had to be there with the children on the bus.
That leads us to the next thing here, which, Molly could talk a little more about, is the issues that we have with these bus drivers and the safety on the bus, even when the children are unattended.
Exactly. So in Ohio, and this did occur in Ohio, but this particular wreck that we're looking at a picture of. But so in Ohio, many other states, when a bus driver, first off, a bus driver for a public school has to go through extensive training. Not only do they have to have their CDL with their passenger endorsement, but there's specific things in order to be a driver for a school, right? For children. These bus drivers do not have to go through that. They simply have to have their CDO with their passenger endorsement, and that's not exactly hard to do. That's probably the easiest part. But I can remember sitting and helping my mom go through and learn every part of her bus from the back to the front and be able to name them, because they had to do all of these inspections and all of this upkeep themselves, or work with the mechanics in the garage to say, hey, I'm due for this, schedule it, et cetera, right? And there's certain amounts of these inspections and work that has to be done on these buses per state law. And this is not applying to LifeWise in any way, shape, or form. As you can see, we've got a photo of a gentleman working on a bus seat. In what looks like his garage, maybe, or a garage. And yes, of course, we know you can work on your own car at home, and it's not a big deal, but you are not driving around other people's children on a day-to-day basis, right? That's where this comes in, because that's why our school districts take this so seriously. That's why our states take this so seriously, because you're putting these children's lives in your hands. That's the next thing. You see this crash here. This is not uncommon. We've had a couple of reports of them. This one, children were actually taken by ambulance to the hospital, so it was a little more serious. This person was cited as being at fault. And for me, the most important thing to know is that when a LifeWise bus driver gets into an accident, they are not bound to the same laws that a school bus driver would be, because if that would happen to a school bus driver, they're taken immediately from the accident, from the scene of the bus, to do a blood test, a drug and alcohol test, basically, to verify that they are not under the influence of any kind, or etc. That's not done. That is not done at all. This person, the driver of this bus, would have never been tested to see if they were under any kind of influence or anything. And again, children were taken to the hospital from this accident. So that is, for me, one of the more concerning things is the transportation side of it, because we spend so much money every year as just collectively a society to keep our children safe when they're going to and from school. And LifeWise is not doing that, despite all of the money and access of resources that they have.
Yep. And, a lot of people like to say, and this guy in the picture here just working on the seat, it's not a big deal. He's working on the seat, but like, is he also doing the brakes? Because that is a big deal, at least to me. Um,
Exactly. And anyone who would say it's just the seat is so far outside of reality. That seat is installed into that bus in a way that has been studied and tested and is designed to keep that passenger safe. So whatever he is doing is outside of the manufacturer warranty, outside of the state requirements. It is his personal vehicle at this point, the way that he's working on it, right? Which is not how it's being used.
right. And, we also have concerns about kids that walk too, because they don't all take these buses. They don't all take these vans. In a lot of schools, in fact, LifeWise prefers if they can just get a building right across the street to walk the children to, and then they don't have this type of transportation cost and these types of transportation worries. But then they're responsible for walking a huge group of kids across the street, right?
Talking about
And
like
that just comes with
45
its own
kids.
concerns.
Yeah, we're talking about like 45 kids with a teacher, maybe two, walking across huge intersections in the middle of busy days. I mean, that is I don't even remember doing that for like field trips. Like we wouldn't do that to go like with our school on a school sponsored field trip, let alone to be taken out by a private corporate entity and taken to an offsite location. So for me, that is just wild because everyone knows that, kids, cars, roads, walking is scary, just generally speaking.
Right. I mean, especially when you consider the kids that we talked about earlier who are already having meltdown and behavioral issues. It would be nothing for a kid who's going through something to just take off running, you
Yep.
know. Um,
And then what do you do if there's only one teacher and let's say 15 kids and one of them takes off? What happens then? That's a situation that would never happen in a public school because they're not going to let one person take all of those children out walking by foot without some sort of, safety measure around it.
So we did background checks a little bit because this is also, one of the biggest concerns that we have. Again, LifeWise just loves to say that all their volunteers are background checked, all of their teachers are background checked, and that is true. They run a background check on their teachers. You have to understand the difference between what LifeWise is running versus what our teachers are running and going through, right? Anybody who works at the school goes through a much more extensive process than what they're using at LifeWise. LifeWise uses these private background check companies. um, they say things here like the National Criminal Database. That's not a real thing. That is what a private company has compiled by buying the databases from counties and from states. It is not complete. It is not everything. There's not just one big national crime database that everybody can access. That's not how it works. And
No.
most people don't understand that. Um, the other really important thing to note here is that the local program directors are the ones who are in charge of running these background checks and passing them. So again, that's why we see different places using different companies. They've used Protect My Ministries in the past. Now they're pushing that they use ProScreen, but we have still seen people using Protect My Ministries even after LifeWise Corporate said they were done using it. We've still seen local communities using it because, like I said, it is the local director who is in charge of running all of these.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I said, Protect My Ministry is the one that they were using previously until we made a big deal about it. I actually ran myself through it, and raised a whole bunch of red flags when I did that. And their insurance company here is Brotherhood Mutual. So this just kind of give you an idea of who they are working with and what their main priority is in protecting. It is not protecting the kids, it is protecting themselves. Yeah, so Molly talked about this a little bit earlier. I think she kind of described the rat back system pretty well. Um, like she said, this is a system where as a teacher in Ohio, you have to be enrolled into this. And if you get a charge, if you get a conviction, it's going to automatically red flag this system and it'll notify your administrators and the state board of ed that there's something happened, something you need to look at. So, and then again, like we said, this is just Ohio. Every state's different, and like I said, there's a good resource in our citations that you can find that out. And yeah, the other thing specifically about the background checks is there are these two separate systems that teachers are going to go through. They're going to go through the FBI criminal background check, which is probably the most extensive, and they're also going to go through a state, as in Ohio, it's the state BCI check. This actually does have all of the counties instead of just the ones that have been bought, right? So there's a big difference there. And this also involves fingerprinting, which LifeWise does not do. None of their background checks require any kind of fingerprinting. Um, Again, in Ohio, but as in most other states too, there are these disqualifying offenses here. This is a short list of some of the offenses that could disqualify you from being a licensed certified teacher in the state of Ohio. They won't necessarily do it. There's another list for, charges that will automatically disqualify you. This one is potentially could disqualify you, but especially if you have multiple of them or, a pattern of it. So, like I said earlier, I ran this background check on myself through Protect My Ministries, and they missed three different individual charges that are on this list here that I have, right? Multiple disorderly conducts were completely skipped over by Protect My Ministry when I ran my background check through them. So these offenses wouldn't even pop up on LifeWise's radar when they're using this third party company. I promise you the FBI knows about them, right? The state certainly knows all about them, but when LifeWise runs their private one, they do not.
No, and I think another thing to mention is that um, you know, even corporations that don't really have any, or what you would think would be much skin in a liability game, like a school or an organization working with kids, even they have more stringent policies. Zach, I believe, did his background check through Lowe's. And Lowe's would not hire him. He could not sell flooring for Lowe's, but LifeWise was going to let him teach children. Now, Zach's a wonderful person. I'd let him teach my children. He's, got a couple of disorderly conducts and some stuff from when he was young. So for me, that's kind of crazy on Lowe's part. But it is mind blowing when you look at the comparison and you think, okay, so Lowe's, the hardware store, would not allow this gentleman to work with them, but LifeWise isn't going to blink. They are going to have no problem at all.
And they're
So
not even going to be aware of it. I mean,
exactly,
maybe they would blink. Look, we could even play devil's advocate and give them the
yeah,
benefit of the doubt, but the problem is they're not even aware of it when their background checks are just straight missing it.
exactly. And I should have been more clear about that. Zach's right. They're not even going to see it, And if they do, we're assuming that they would blink, that they would not hire that person. But again, we don't know. We don't know that because it's it's technically not stated anywhere.
So this actually came up very recently at a school district here in Indiana. Um, New Prairie just put out this press release about local LifeWise volunteers trying to, get the program off the ground there. And they talk about how, they had asked a couple times before about the background checks that LifeWise was running, and LifeWise was saying they would be shared with the school district. They said this, in the initial talks and in, some of the talks after that. But then recently, when it came down to it, like they're trying to get off the trying to get off the ground, trying to get the program running, and the school district says, "Okay, well, we want to see these background checks." LifeWise refused. It says after nearly 6 weeks of waiting, LifeWise informed the district they would not share the background check results of their volunteers with the school district and would not require their volunteers to participate in the school district's background check policies and are under no legal obligation to cooperate with the request. So they are just flat out refusing at this point.
Yeah.
Um, so the school district said, listen, we're not going to consent to the students being released to LifeWise without having a proper background check implemented. Now, we have some updates because, like I said, this is all very fresh. Um, After this was put out, LifeWise put out a statement and said, listen, we said we would ask our volunteers to come do your checks.
To release their background information to them.
No, they weren't going to do that. They were going to send the volunteers to run a background check through the school, through their own systems, right?
Okay.
And then just yesterday, the school district responded saying that that was false. They never made those statements. They sent an email to the school district 9 hours after releasing that press release where they said, we told the school we would allow them to do this. The school district said this isn't false. They said this after they put the press release out. So it's still just all being thought about and handled. It's just really interesting to see, I like to see a school district calling out their lies. I love it personally. So
And I think that here's for me what the big takeaway is, right? Is that LifeWise says we run these background checks. We have had many school districts and many concerned parents say, okay, great, they're running these background checks. they have been told in many other school districts that those background checks were being made available, that they were being given to the school, right? So what this comes down to,
Some state laws require it, in fact. Let's be real clear about that. There are state laws that said they must share these.
yes,
So
correct. That is a recent law too, right? That law says now specifically that they have to share these background checks. Um, but I think what the important thing to remember is like this is one school who pushed back. So, how many other schools have just taken their word for it and not stood up for the safety of their kids? How many other schools have never seen those background checks? How many other schools have people coming in and out of their building that they know nothing about? That is the important takeaway, because for the one school that has stood up, there are hundreds who have just taken their word at face value. And that is horrifying. It's unacceptable, is what it is.
and unfortunately, there is a long history of scandals revolving sexual abuse, especially in evangelical churches and, in religious institutions abroad, to be honest. This is so widespread. I put this slide together and I'm like, I'll just find a couple headlines. As you can see, there were so many headlines. I couldn't even pick any. This is half of what I found, just Googling a simple evangelical sex scandal. That's literally all I Googled, and I had dozens of articles that read just like this. It's
This is like a third
terrifying.
of what you find just on a basic search. I mean, it is we literally don't have enough time to get into it, but they from the beginning of their formation as a church, they have had sex scandal issues and they have continuously covered them up and allowed them to continue. And they have shuffled their clergy around and they have covered up things with money and connections and everything you can think of in order to continue what it is that they're doing.
Yep. So actual studies and numbers are pretty limited on this type of stuff, but the available statistics that we have show that globally, 18% of girls and 7.6% of boys are sexually abused by clergy. That's of the entire world population.
Zach and I had to look at that statistic for like an hour and just really go through it and confirm that what we were reading was what the actual, what the data that is available, this is the truth, this is correct. And, we're like, wait, is that 18% of abuse victims? Is that what, what is that? No, that is 18% of little girls experience sexual assault from their clergy members, from their pastors, from their reverends, from their rabbis. This is across the board, remember, but 18%, I want you to think about that. Of all the little girls in the world, 18%. Little boys, is it seven? I don't have it in front of me, Zach. I'm sorry.
7.6, yeah.
I'm gonna leave them out. 7.6% of all little boys. And when you see these
I
headlines
mean,
and
that's 25% of children. When you add those two numbers up, that's 25% of all the children.
of all of the children, and when you go and you do the research on it, the evangelicals are some of the worst offenders. And they are the ones that are the most adept at covering it up. Honestly, when everybody thinks of abuse in the church, they think of Catholics. And that is simply not accurate. It is across the board and it is hugely prevalent in some, denominations over others. But evangelical and Catholic, we see, are just absolutely inundated with pedophiles and predators.
Yeah. And part of that really comes down to the doctrine of what they're teaching, because there is this belief that they aren't accountable to anybody but God, and all they have to do is ask for forgiveness. So it isn't a problem to cover this up from your community, to cover it up from your congregation, because it's between you and God that you have sinned, right? It's not between you and the government that you've committed a crime. That's not the issue at hand, even though it damn well should be. Um, and yeah, like we were saying, this is all over the world. In Germany, they're saying 4.4% of the nation's clergy have been accused. So in France, systemic sexual abuse has been carried out in about 3,000 priests, involving over 200,000 victims. Like, these numbers are just horrifying. And this isn't just these countries. Like we've said, this is all over the world. Australia has a really big problem with it. Italy's had a really big problem with it. And then, of course, we can talk about America. There have been over 5,000 priests and clergy members that have been credibly accused of sexually abusing children. And these numbers are all from like 15 years ago. These numbers are from the 80s until 2005, I believe. Again, we've got all the citations in the back, so feel free to double check any of this because we've got all of them, in the resource page at the end.
And when Zach says credible, that word, when we were talking about this and sort of making this, um, that really stuck with me, because what that means is that 5,000 of those clergy members, sorry, that they had proof of some sort, right? That they could prove it. And everyone here knows that bad things happen all the time with no proof. So, how many more accusations were had that weren't credible? That's what you need to think about as well.
Because it is intentionally and systemically being covered up. Again, and going back to what they believe. We've seen this. We have seen them hire predators. We'll get into some of the examples here. Renee Beck, I'm sure most people who've been following us for a while know about because it was a big deal. Renee Beck was hired as a director of LifeWise. We got an anonymous tip. Molly Googled her name, and the first headline that pops up is this one about the board firing her because she was accused of sexting a student. Um, they didn't accept her resignation, they fired her, and part of her agreement with authorities was that she would permanently give up her teaching license in the state of Ohio in order to not get charges. So, this is the type of stuff that we see all the time. And again, I'll speak very candidly as somebody who has a long criminal record. We see these types of crimes getting let off more than any other types of crime. It is ridiculous, it's disgusting, and it's something that I personally cannot understand. We will throw the book at somebody over an alcohol charge, over a drug charge, but when it comes to this type of thing, when we have predators lurking on children, they always seem to get bare minimum, if anything.
Yes, exactly. And I think also, we all know this, but this is the reality. This is the black and white reality of what we all know subconsciously, is that when someone is a predator, when they are a pedophile, they seek out children. They seek out situations to put them in to be around children. So if you have that inclination, you become a teacher, you get caught doing that, you cannot be a teacher anymore in a public school setting, but you still want to be around children. One of the easiest ways to do that is to turn around and do so in a church setting, because they do not have the same accountability. They don't have the same system set up. They don't do the same kind of investigations that a public school would do. So it's almost like, well, if you've been kicked out of this realm or this arena, I can turn around and still be around kids if I just take it to the church. And we see that time and time and time again in all kinds of situations where,
Or the Boy Scouts, not just churches. This
no,
this is this is predators looking for easy
yes,
targets, and that is
exactly.
anywhere they can get them, anywhere they can fly under the radar.
Mhm. It's a daycare that's private, whether it's Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Good News Club stuff, whatever it is, right? If they can get around kids, if they can go and be a youth minister after they've gotten fired from being a teacher, why wouldn't they do that? And if there's no one checking, what's stopping them?
Right. And after we brought this to light, LifeWise did end up terminating her. But their claim was that she lied on her background check. It doesn't matter because nothing would have came up on her background check. As we said, she didn't get a charge because she made her plea agreement. But it took a simple Google search of her name to find this scandal about her, right?
Yeah.
And as somebody who, like I said, did their background check, when they say she lied on her background check, the question was, do you have any crimes on your record that would stop you from working with children? Yes or no? So literally, you just check yes or no. It would be nothing to lie about that. And she didn't lie. She didn't have the conviction, sure, but she knew the answer to that was yes.
And everybody in her community knew the answer to that too. That's the other thing. That tip didn't come out of nowhere. That is someone who was concerned about this person, followed her from wherever she was in Ludenville teaching and gotten fired, and realized that she was now going to be the director of another sort of children educational situation. And they were like, what? And sent me her name. I mean, that's what that is. but that's not an institution. That's not the police. That's not, you know, we're not even a newspaper. This is a parent run grassroots organization that is breaking stories that are the only thing that's keeping children away from a woman like this.
And this isn't the only one, unfortunately.
Nope.
We'll get to that in a minute, though. You want to tell them about this one, Molly?
Yeah, Jillian Jimenez, I think is how we say it. We're not sure. Jimenez. Excuse me. I apologize. That's not the point. The point is that this person was hired to be a committee member. So she's a member of the steering committee for LifeWise, and that's sort of the people that put the ball in motion in getting it in your district and really sort of push it and get, get the funds and get the other support in town. And so she would have been sort of head of that. This woman,
They
um,
also trickle down. Don't think for a second that those steering committee members do not then trickle down after the program is off the ground to become directors and volunteers and teachers.
exactly. Because again, a lot of these places are small towns. There's only so many people, and so they are wearing different hats, right? Same person. But Jillian here has charges of child neglect, like multiple of them. There's one that really stuck, which is this misdemeanor count. She was watching a 2-year-old child and it was like 30 degrees outside. I read the police report, and he was streets over barefoot wandering when the police found him and were like, what's going on? And they had to find, like, search and find out where he came from and who was watching him. And it was her, and she ran a child care center. I'm not sure if she still does, Kitty. That would be something that we should probably look into. But I don't believe so. I believe this was maybe in a couple years past, like not too far past. Obviously this is 2020, but I think her latest endeavor is LifeWise.
Now we can talk about the other instance that, really shocked us and that we like to think we helped make a difference in. DeKalb Eastern here in Indiana. Butler Elementary was getting their program off the ground, and they were sending home all the information to parents. And it turns out they were going to hold their LifeWise class in the boardroom of a factory called Color Master. This factory has dangerous chemicals in it, first of all. So they're in the boardroom, fine. They're going to be in the office part of it. It's going to do nothing if there is a fire at this factory, whether you're on the factory floor or in the office.
Nope.
You can think that I'm speaking theoretically. This literally just happened a week ago. This place just caught fire about a week ago. Um, so thankfully they didn't end up coming here. But when they were trying to get off the ground, this is what their plan was. And this isn't trying to get off the ground. This is already school approved. We see in an email here, this is from the school themselves, knew that LifeWise was taking these students to Color Master, and they were fine with it. Maybe they didn't think they could do anything about it. Maybe they didn't care. Maybe they were just fine with it. All of those things concern me. No matter what the answer is, for the school district knowing they were sending kids to a factory once a week concerns me.
The other part of this that is, I don't know what's more concerning, to be honest with you.
The
The
next
fact
part.
that Zach, I
This
think
part.
Zach's right. This factory allows felons and criminals to work at their facility, including violent sexual predators. So some places will allow this, some places won't. I'm a big believer in um, people being reformed and getting a second chance and that sort of thing. So I don't have a problem with Color Master themselves hiring these sorts of people. But why would there ever in a million years be minors on the property when they are hiring people that they know have backgrounds like this?
Right. And this is the really the next part of that is why isn't LifeWise checking where they are going, right? We can talk about this being a factory and this sexual predator being here, but as we've seen, there are also sexual predators in these churches that they are taking them to too. It would be nothing for this guy to snatch a kid
No.
in a
And
factory. It's insane.
exactly. And so, okay, we've talked about their background checks. We've talked about what they put up their employees and their volunteers to, right? But then think about this. They're taking the children off site to these places where people are coming and going. like a Color Max factory, like a church, like a YMCA, like a community center. These people that are coming in and out of these places are not background checked. They're not fingerprinted. They don't their parents might not even know that they're going to be around their children, right? Because there's the crossover, and that doesn't happen when you're in a school. Because everybody in that school has to have those background checks and that sort of oversight. That's not the case when you're taking these kids off site to all these different places where the public has access to.
The other thing, I didn't list this guy's charges on this slideshow because I didn't want to get into it. They are against minors. It only says sexually violent predator here. Just know that they are against minors and they are so grotesque that I didn't want to put them on this slideshow.
Yeah.
So yeah, like Molly was saying, we can talk about these people at the churches where LifeWise is being supported and being held, right?
This is another example of that. Faith Life Church is a huge mega church in New Albany, Ohio. They're very famous for sort of their involvement in their community and otherwise, and for having these very stringent and strict conservative Christian values. This is just a little part right here showing that, first off, this is Drenda Kesey. She is the county commissioner for Knox County. She was elected as that. She is also the co-pastor, co-owner, founder of Faith Life Church there with her husband. And she has something called a, what is it? What do they call it? Like, she called it a prayer warrior, or no, I'm sorry,
Mom's Fight Club.
Mom's Fight Club. So she has her own little version of Moms for Liberty, and they go around and they just stir trouble and support things that are of their ilk. And LifeWise is one of those things. Come on down. If you're local, join us. So they're at the middle school library during a school board meeting supporting LifeWise as an entire church. We see that a lot. So that's giving
They're
me
also breaking the first rule of Fight Club, which is don't talk about Fight Club. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
But so yeah, so these people have a lot of history. And then you turn around and you find out, oh, well, they're big supporters of LifeWise. They're defending them. They're bringing people to school board meetings to push it. And then boom, we find out that their son has been abusing children in their church, abusing young girls in their church for decades, um, including that of his own sister. The sister came out and actually
Right.
testified against the brother and backed up these claims. But there's several young women, children that he abused over years and years and years. They had him being a part, like a head of the youth ministry at one point. They transferred him to do another job, and we believe in order to protect him because they knew what was going on. That's according to the girls that have spoken out, not us personally, but I also agree with them. I mean, um it seems really convenient that they would switch everything around and move his position and stuff. And it's really funny, but once Drenda got elected to be the commissioner, they absolutely sort of took him out of everything. So for me, that's an indication that they knew exactly what was going on and they were covering it up. But these are the sort of people that are involved with the supporters of LifeWise and of these evangelical churches in these small towns and in these large towns too.
Linda Scholes here is another one. She was hired as the director here in Buckeye Central, Ohio. Way too far. She also is a deacon at a church that is hosting LifeWise here, the Evangelical Pietist Church of Chatfield, Ohio. So she's the director of LifeWise and a deacon at this church. Here in this Facebook post, you can see they're having the church community members meet with the kids during LifeWise, right? Get to know one another, shared fun facts, made connections, yada, 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 right? They're doing this in the church, in her church. This individual is another sexual predator who is the basketball coach at that church. These are just a few of the examples that we have stumbled upon. Our biggest concern is how many examples we don't know about. It is so important to check your communities, to know who is working where, what churches are hosting and holding and hiding these types of individuals. And if they're involved with this program that brings kids right to them.
Hmm. Hmm. Another thing that we haven't touched on, but is just interesting, is that um, LifeWise has this outrageous merch store, and you can go there and you can buy all of these branded things. Um, Such things include t-shirts that say LifeWise Teacher. I actually own one. I have a shirt that says LifeWise Teacher. One of these days I'll wear it to show an example. But the point is that I went on there and bought that so I could go and put that shirt on and show up to one of these schools and just say, "Hey, I'm here to replace, I don't know, Robin today," or whatever. And I'm telling you that 9 times out of 10, they're not going to question me because I'm a woman, because I have a LifeWise shirt on, probably because I'm white, unfortunately, right? And because I am a Christian if I'm doing this. And that is the other concern, is that anybody off the street, whether or not they're involved in the program, can get this merch, can pose as a volunteer, can do this, can use this to get to the children in the community because they are so open with their merchandising and their advertising and their push for just like this grift, right? It makes it so much easier to attract outside predators as well. We have a Facebook post. Remember that post? There's a post that actually said like um
They
it
went
was
door to door during the summer.
yeah,
They
it
went
was a
door
random
to door to
comment.
students' houses during the summer.
It was a random comment on a Facebook page for LifeWise, and it was just some guy like, "It was so wonderful wearing our LifeWise t-shirts and going around during the summer door to door to talk to children." Excuse me, what? If that doesn't scare you, I don't know what will. So this is just some guy on the internet who's going around in the neighborhood that he knows has this LifeWise, because again, it's advertised all over the internet, and going door to door to try to talk to kids about God or their parents or both. You tell me how good that's going to turn out.
And I think this is our final example here. Robin Frey. She was actually involved and had to testify in a court case about the pastor of her church that she was the treasurer at, um, who got transferred and promoted because of his sexual abuse. This, like we said earlier, there is this problem of covering it up, which, we can see again and again across all denominations. This is what the Catholics had a real problem with. It's what the evangelicals do too. They simply change churches, they change communities, right? So the pastor of her church, this happened, he did it. And she was actually writing the checks with his new raise and his new promotion. Even though he was at the new church, she was still writing checks from the old church.
Knowing what he had done in her church, and
We
then
assume. Why,
and then
why, why would you not ask questions? It's real
and then
hard to believe that you
facilitating
didn't.
him being paid at another church to to um prey on these other kids in this other congregation. And she knew that. And that's why she got called on the stand to testify about it.
And again, it was the last thing to touch on here. Keep in mind, these are the individuals doing the background checks for all of the volunteers and the teachers. If she's fine with brushing it under the rug for her pastor, why wouldn't she do it for her teachers or her volunteers? The
Mhm.
other thing that I don't think we mentioned is the mandated reporting. LifeWise loves to claim that they are mandated reporters. If anything happens, they have to tell somebody. That's not what mandated reporting is. The LifeWise policies say their mandated reporting is you tell your superior in LifeWise. Anybody who knows what actual mandated reporting is understands that there are requirements that you tell Child Protective Services or you tell the police. That's what mandated reporting is. It isn't tell your boss, because we
Right.
know how that works out.
You specifically don't keep it within your ranks. That's the point. And that is exactly what they do via instructions from their handbook, is to keep it within their ranks.
Right.
That is not a mandated reporter, like Zach said. And for them to say so is almost an insult, to be honest with me. Like, that is insulting and disgusting for them to claim that that's what they are, when in reality, it's so opposite of what the definition actually is. Again, like it's not just Robin either. It was the other woman too, the one that we spoke about who was sexting students and got fired. She was a director. That is the person they put in charge of doing background checks on the other teachers and volunteers in her program. How does that make any sense? Aren't you going to background
Same
check the
thing.
person who's doing your background checks?
And same thing with the deacon that was, had the basketball coach at their church. Like, everything that we've shown you today has been, could have happened, tangentially happened, or we're worried it might happen and we stopped it. It's only a matter of time before something truly awful happens because of this program directly, because of their lack of oversight.
Yep.
And
And
people
I
need
think
to understand that. They really do.
really, and I think that Zach and I and us as an organization and those that are really involved with us, we're almost playing a really awful waiting game because we understand all of these holes, and the ultimate result of that is going to be that a child gets hurt. And that's when people will start paying attention. But that's already too late, because in my estimation, there are already children being hurt, whether it's physically or not. There's children getting restrained, there's children that are hitting and hurting each other, there are children who are confused about their souls, there are children who are losing friends because their friends are different religions. I mean, these are children who are suffering at the hands of this company. And don't forget it, it's a company, not a church. They are a corporation, and they don't care about these kids, they care about their bottom line.
I know this one was really hard for me to make, so it's one of the most painful topics to talk about, but it's also the most concerning for me personally. It really bothers me that kids are missing their educational time, that they're getting bullied, that they're getting discriminated against. But when I start thinking about this and how dangerous it is, I mean, it just gets to me. So, like I said earlier, we've got all of our citations and all our reference materials and that QR code there. Please join our email list if you're not already on it. Keep you informed. I think that's everything.
Yeah, we appreciate you
Guys got
guys
any,
taking the time.
you guys got any questions? Feel free, drop them in the chat, email
Yeah,
us, contact seculareducationassociation.org. Be here.
yep, we'll absolutely do what we can to help assist you or to answer any questions that you have. So this has been a tough one.